What's up, guys? Today I'm in the middle of doing this Orco tattoo. This is part of a bigger leg sleeve that I'm gonna be working on, and I want to go ahead and take the opportunity to narrate to you guys in real time what I'm doing, in hopes that it can help you understand my process and it can help you improve or for you to create your own process based on what I'm sharing here today. So far with Orco, it's already been outlined and the black has already been done. This was done in a previous session, so I'm not worried today about the outline. We're just gonna do the color. And Orco is using, the way that Orco was designed was using cell shading, which is a very simple style of shading, which is basically two tones of color. You got a dark value and a lighter value, as you guys see here in the hat. So it's really simple, really straightforward. It looks super nice because of my experience, and I've basically just mastered the basics. So that's why I think this is a great video to make for you guys, because this is basically the basics of tattooing mastered. Okay, so far I've done the top of the hat and I've done some of the shadows right here, and right now I'm gonna start doing the lighter side on this side of the hat. Okay, now the way that I go about it is that I like to make sure that every single spot of the skin, every single area of the skin has to be fully saturated for me. Okay, if it is not, it's not a good tattoo for me. Okay, so I'm very thorough when it comes to this. And how do I do that? So I could come in here with a magnum or a big needle and just fill the entire area, but what ends up happening when you do that is you'll see a lot of open spots here around the edge. So what I do to resolve that issue is I take a round shader, which is a rounded needle. It's like a pointy needle, and I'm going to basically almost do like an inner outline that's going to border the existing outline. And this has several purposes. One of the purposes to this is obviously making sure that the tattoo is extremely solid and there are no gaps in any spots of the tattoo. That's number one. Number two is that these lines, whenever you do an outline or just color in general over the years, it tends to spread. Okay, it spreads over the skin, especially if you have nothing here, you have blank skin, and you do outline or you do color here. This color, the particles of this color are going to spread over to the other side. Okay, now by me outlining the edge and doing a border here, what I'm doing is literally that. I'm creating a border, and because there are going to be particles right up to this line, it's not going to allow the particles on the other side to move over to the other side. So I'm basically creating a barrier with the ink to make sure that the outline stays in place over the years. Okay, and this is gonna make for such a clean tattoo, and it's gonna last a lot longer, guys. It does take a little bit longer to do it, but I mean, that's just the name of the game. That's how I like to do it, just to make sure that my tattoos are gonna stand the test of time. So we're gonna do that all around. And this color that I'm using, guys, is a color from Eternal that is called Light Red. I absolutely love this color. I use it every time I'm doing some sort of red palette. It's a color that I like having out because it's super bright and it makes great light tones, and it can be mixed with other colors like yellows and oranges to create different hues. And it's extremely saturated, so I absolutely love this color. In this case, I actually mixed it with just a tiny little bit of orange to make it a little brighter, and I put like maybe a couple of drops of white into it because I did want it to look like this color is being lit by light. So I didn't use it straight out of the bottle, but it's almost just as bright when it's out of the bottle. It's a great color to use. I absolutely love this color. So now I'm gonna get into this little spot right here. And this little spot, because it's so small, I'm not gonna bring a bigger needle out to fill it in. I'm just gonna go ahead and fill it in with this 5 round shader, okay? So first, I'm gonna do the edges the same way that I've done everything else. And when you're outlining and when you're doing things that have precision, and that's why you'll hear me pause, is because I'm taking a moment and sometimes I'm holding my breath or I'm exhaling as I'm doing something with a lot of precision, because that's gonna stop my hand from moving, from shaking. So you see, when I'm shading I can talk just fine, but when I'm outlining I'm gonna stay a little bit quiet, and that's the reason why, guys. You gotta make sure that your lines are solid, and the only way to do that is by controlling your breath. Okay, so I'm gonna bring this color a little bit further out here. That way I can come back with my bigger needle and color right up to it without having to go over the edge. Now, what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take another needle, which is, I believe I'm using a 7 mag right now. And with the 7 Magnum, I'm going to thicken this outline that I just did, okay? But I'm gonna angle my needle this way. I'm gonna angle it out because I want the color to feather out in order to connect it with my other needle, okay? So I'm gonna angle the needle out and I'm gonna feather out, just like this. See, what I'm doing is I'm creating a softer edge. So I'm going to do this all the way around. I'm going to do it on this side. Make sure that the needle is angled in, because I want a hard edge on this guy, in this instance on the upper side. I want a hard edge, and I want a soft edge on the inside. Okay, just like that. Okay, and now that I have that, I can come back into it with a bigger needle, and I can just go into it worry-free, okay? Because I don't have to worry about the edges. I don't have to worry that I'm gonna go out of the lines, any of that, because I've already built this border. And you guys can see how clean that looks. Alright, so I think right now I'm using, I believe this is a 17. No, this is a 13 Magnum, okay? And you guys will notice that I'm still not going so big with my needles. I could be using a 17 or a 23 in order to fill this in. But what I have learned and what I have noticed is that bigger needles create more resistance in the skin, okay? Because there's so many needles. You guys remember those, I mean, I grew up watching those cartoons of like the guys that would lay in the needle, the bed of needles. The reason why they wouldn't get hurt is because the bed has so many needles that it created so much resistance on the skin, so it would allow him to lay on it without being hurt, right? So it's just kind of the same concept. The more needles that you have, the harder it is for those needles to go into to break the skin, essentially. So that's why I like using smaller needles. Obviously sometimes you have to use bigger needles according to the space, but I try to go for, especially when I'm doing color. When I'm doing black and gray, it's a little different, but when I'm doing color, I want to use the smaller needle that I can use in the area given, without obviously going too small, because if not, it's just going to make my job impossible. So a number 13 is perfect for this instance right here. And now, even though it looks solid, you guys can see it's solid, the skin can still take a little bit more color. So I'm gonna go over this one more time with the needle in order to make sure that it's as solid and as saturated as I possibly can. Now the skin's already open, which means the skin is already absorbent. So you don't have to put the same amount of pressure on the needle. You're literally just going to graze the skin lightly and just go right over, and it's gonna soak up the color right away. And doing this extra layer will go a long way, guys. It'll make sure that your tattoo stands the test of time and is super solid. This is just a very quick pass, very superficial. This is something that you got to build the sensitivity to, because you can go over and you can hurt the skin. But you know, I've done this so many times in my life that I already know how much I can push the skin without hurting it. So this is going to be the last pass that I give this. Okay. Actually, I'm going to do one more pass right here. Okay, now we're really solid. So I'm going to clean it up so you guys can see so far how it's looking. All right, look at how clean that looks. And you always want to do your shadows first, because some colors, the darker colors are always going to stain the lighter colors. So there's a certain order to the way that I work the skin. So this is something that you got to be very conscious of, because you can stain your colors and it's not going to look as clean as you want it to look. So that's why you guys will notice that I did all my shadows first, and and then I'm going to do all my lighter colors. Also, cooler colors are always going to stain warmer colors. So I always go dark cool to dark dark cool, dark warm, light cool, light warm. Now in this case right here, the ear, I'm going to do this spot right here. The reason why I left it for later and I didn't do it before this red is because the blue that I'm going to use here is actually going to be lighter than this red. So it's not going to stain the red. The red would have stained that blue. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Okay, so I'm gonna do this ear right now, and for this ear I'm gonna use a 5 round shader. Okay, you gotta make sure you clean your needle out. So especially when the needles, they have a different color already in it, I'm very thorough when it comes to cleaning the needle, because I want my colors to be as clean as possible. So how do you do that? So I make sure that I rinse it several times, and then I dip into a color. In this case, usually the color that I'm gonna apply, and then I rinse again with the color that I'm gonna apply, and that makes sure that the reservoir, it's extremely clean. I do that a couple of times. I'm actually doing that right now. I'm dipping into my color, and then I'm rinsing. I'm cleaning off my needle. And then I do it a couple of times, 2-3 times, just depending how dirty the needle is. And now that my needle is clean, then I'm ready to color. Okay? Okay, so right now I'm using a color from Fusion that's called BIMINI blue. It's a great color, guys. I love this blue for several reasons, but one of them is that it's not your typical blue. It's not it's a blue between blue and green almost. It kind of has like a teal look to it, so it's kind of warm. It's on the warmer side of blue, and I love this blue because it's great for light. When things are lit up by the light, they tend to warm up, obviously, because light is warm, right? So using this color, I can create shades of blue that look like they're being lit up by the sun. So this is a great blue to use. And this same color was the color that I used for the shadow. I just mixed a little bit of black into it. And the reason why I did that is because the shadow was a little bit desaturated. It had a little bit of gray to it. So instead of using a darker color out of the bottle, I decided, let me take this blue, mix it with a little bit of black, and it's gonna give me that dirty blue that I was looking for. And that color is going to lighten up, guys. Like the way that you're seeing it right here, you know, you're seeing some of the blood from my client that's surfacing up right now. And because this is a lighter tone, it kind of surfaces through it, and it mixes with the color and it looks dark. You see that? You see how it's surfacing up? So you'll be able to see the true color in a little while. After he stops bleeding, that's when you're gonna see it. This is really important to notice because a lot of people, especially when they're starting out, they'll make the mistake of going over an area too many times because they're using a color that's too light. Like it could be white, it could be a blue like this, it could be a light green, it could be a yellow, and you think it's not going in, and it is. You just have to wait for your client to stop bleeding, okay? So just be patient, make sure you're applying your color correctly, and then just wait. Once he stops bleeding, he or she, if you go back to it, you check it, and then if it's got a little spot that is missing or something, then you can fill it in. Okay, and you guys will notice that I'm not being too erratic with my movement. I'm using very controlled movements just to make sure that I go over every single area in the tattoo. There's no rush to this. Very erratic, not erratic, but very systematic instead. To make sure that my color's in. Also to make sure that I'm not hurting his skin. Because if you start making erratic movements all over, you're gonna tear up the tissue. It's almost like paper. I don't know if you guys, you've done a drawing on paper and you go over the paper too many times with the pencil and the paper starts breaking apart. That's the same thing that happens to the skin when you go over it too many times, or when you're too erratic, or when you're going into it in so many angles. The skin will have the same problem, okay? So make sure you don't do that. Alright, so now I'm switching colors. I'm gonna start working on the scarf. And the scarf is using it's like a red violet mixed with a little bit of white. So I'm gonna mix that color right now. I do have a red violet here in my palette already available. And I check it here in my glove just to make sure that it's the right color, and I think I want it to be a little bit lighter than that, so you guys will see that's a little bit lighter. That's too light, so I have to make something in between those two colors. Okay, so this seems, it feels like a good color to me. I like it. So that's the color that I'm gonna use. And again, I'm gonna go into all my edges. I'm gonna clean up all these edges using my 5 round shader, okay? I'm gonna clean all of this up. It's very straightforward. It's not an extremely complicated process, and I try to simplify tattooing as much as I can to help me understand it, because I'm not the brightest of people. So I've created my own systems that are very, very simple, and hopefully by me being able to break things down in such a simple way to myself, I can break it down very simply to you guys, and you guys can understand it. So I need to make a little bit of adjustment to this color, make it a little bit brighter. Let me do that real quick. That's too bright. That feels right. Okay. Alright, so I'm gonna make sure that I go over all of these edges, holding my breath to make sure that I get a crispy line. And you guys will notice, like, a lot of, old school tattooing, they used to do a lot of, they would say make small circles when you're filling in this, the color. They used to say small circles to saturate. I don't think it's a good idea to make small circles, because it destroys the tissue. Okay, so I always go back and forth, only back and forth, and you want to make sure that you try to go always in the same direction in the skin. In this case, I'm going side to side, so I'm gonna try to go side to side for the most part. Sometimes you're not gonna be able to, but try to go in the same direction as much as you can. See how I'm going back and forth here, making a back and forth movement. I'm cleaning up this edge. So now, using my 9 round shader, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna work off of these corners. Oops. You guys don't want that. You see how my towel is dirty and it had a little bit of black into it? It'll stain your color. So make sure that if you're using a color, you're using a towel that's either clean or it's dirty with the same color that you're using. This isn't the case that you want to do something this clean, if you want this look, because some colors can get dirtied up if you're doing realism, but this is not what we're trying to achieve here today. Okay, so I want to make sure that everything is as clean as possible. And you guys will notice that I'm using the round shader to fill in this bigger space. It's okay, you can do it. Actually, round shaders, they saturate really, really well, and they're great for texture, but they are super abrasive, and you have to be careful when you're using these needles. The way that I've learned to use them is by thinking about my hand movement as if I was like either grazing or just barely scratching the surface of the skin. Like, you don't want to dig the skin with this needle, because you will hurt it, but you can graze the skin. You can almost do like light scratches on the skin. Imagine you're itching, you're just scratching that surface. You're just scratching that surface, and you can go over the same area a couple of times, but definitely not as many times as you can go over when you're using a Magnum, okay? The Magnum, it's a little bit kinder to the skin, not the round shader. The round shader, it's a very effective needle, but it's kind of dangerous. I do like going over the areas several times because I want to make sure when it heals like this. This right here, guys, you see this? This is fully healed. Look how saturated and solid that looks. Okay, so now I'm switching needles over, and this needle had a little bit of red into it, so I'm gonna rinse it off, clean it. Now I'm gonna dip into the color that I'm using. I'm going to rinse it, and I'm gonna dip into the color again, and now I'm ready to use it. And we're going to continue going in the same direction that I was going previously, okay? Same direction. You cannot switch directions. You can if you want to, but this is gonna be this is better for the skin. There are no rules when it comes to tattooing, so you can technically do whatever you want. You can create your own systems, you can figure out your own way of working. It's the same as painting and just art in general. But I mean, there are certain things that you cannot change, which is the fact that you're working with skin, and you have to be as gentle as you can possibly be to it, so it can heal well. I'm going to do a couple of passes here in this area just to make sure that it's nice and solid. One more pass. Dipping again. Okay, so now I'm going to work on the shadow side of the clothing that he has on, the shirt that he has on. And as I'm noticing here in my reference, it's a dark red, but it's a cooler red. So this is a red that has a little bit of magenta to it. So I'm gonna try to find that red in my palette. So you guys will see here, this is a little bit too purple for my taste. It's not what I'm looking for. That one is too red, so I think if I make a combination of those two colors, then I can get the tone that I'm looking for. And that feels more like it. Actually, it should be a little bit lighter. That feels right. So that's the color that I'm gonna use. And later in a different video, I'm gonna show you guys how I mix my colors, so you have a better understanding of how to do that. But for now, I just want to make sure that I go over the application. And usually, for example, in this cases where I'm doing a design that has a two-dimensional look to it, it's very flat, and there are areas of color, there are large areas of the same color. You want to make sure that you pre-mix the color, that way you get a consistent color. And I just noticed that I wasn't doing that, so I'm going to take a moment to do that. I'm going to take a cup, like a clean cup, and I'm going to mix the color that I want into it. So I believe I'm using a little bit of, I don't know the names of the colors, but I I know there's a very hot, cool red. There's a darker version of that I'm using, and I'm mixing that with a little bit of purple in order to get the color that I want. But I don't know the names of the colors off the top of my head, so you know, in the tattoo industry, colors have the weirdest names. So okay, so now that I have my color mixed in, I'm just gonna go ahead and take my time and just go through all my shadows with the same color. I like making, when I tattoo, I usually have my design pretty much ready to go. I'm not the type of person that likes to improvise while I'm tattooing. I like to have everything prepared and ready to go beforehand. I just don't like venturing out and trying things on people's skin. That's just the way that I am. Not because there's anything wrong with it, I just simply don't feel comfortable doing that, because I'm a little bit more structured when it comes to my technique. So the reason why I'm saying this is because usually when I have a design ready, I already know exactly the palettes that I'm going to be using, the colors. The designs usually have exactly the colors that I want to use. And for me, it helps me out a lot, because it helps me prepare. It helps me prepare, and it helps me get the result that I want. And I know there's not going to be any surprises. For some people, this might not be the best way of tattooing, because some people like the freedom of being creative and just being more loose when it comes to their craft. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, you know, there's simply different type of people out there in the world, and you have to understand where you fall. Now, if you're going to be improvising and just trying different things on the skin on the fly, I definitely recommend you to know your shit. Like, you really gotta know your stuff, so you're not hurting you know, because you can't waste time on the client's skin if you're just thinking. You can't just be thinking and wasting time, because you know, you have the needle against the skin and you can really hurt the skin. So you have to either be prepared, or you have to know your shit. One of the two. I think I'm gonna darken this color just a little bit. Let's see. I like that. I felt that I needed to darken that color a little bit, because I want more contrast between my shadows and my light tones. So I can't change what I've already done, but I can try to adjust it a little bit very lightly. So I'm just gonna grace over these areas very, very lightly, hoping that I can darken it up just a little bit. And it's okay, you won't notice the difference too much in the end result. Once the skin's already open, this is something that I want you guys to understand. Like, the tattoo machine does not inject ink into the skin. That's a common mistake that people think about. That's not the way you should be thinking about tattooing. The way you should be thinking about tattooing is that you're opening up the surface, you're opening up the skin with the needles. And when the skin is open, when the skin is open, it becomes a porous surface. Any surface that is porous becomes absorbent, okay? So the skin actually absorbs the ink. You're not injecting the ink into the skin. All you're doing is just opening up the surface, and you're gonna let the skin absorb the ink. And once you understand that, you can be a lot more gentle in your tattooing technique, because you're not gonna feel like you have to put all this pressure into the skin in order to get the color in there. You just gotta make sure that you're thorough, that you open every single pore, and the skin will do the rest of the job, okay? So you can do all of this very, very gentle. You gotta remember one thing. You're using a metal needle on tissue that is mostly made out of water. So, you know, it's a battle that the skin cannot win. So you have to really be conscious of that, and you have to be gentle when it comes to doing your job. Turn a little bit. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna do this little corner here. I like using my round shaders again because I want the separations of the dark color and the light color to be super clean. The cleaner the better. You know, I'm working with hard edges, so I want to be deliberate, and I want those edges to be extremely hard. If I'm gonna make soft edges, I'm gonna make soft edges. If I'm gonna make hard edges, I'm gonna make some hard edges. So you gotta understand what it is that you're going for. That way you can use the tool that is necessary to create that result. And that's why, for example, I specifically use many needles in my setup. Every single needle arrangement I use. Not arrangement, but like needle number. All my needles are medium tapers, but I do like using every single number. I want to have them at my disposal because I want to make sure that I use the right needle for the right job. If you try to skip corners and you try to use needles that you're not supposed to use, you know, you got to change it to a smaller needle, but you try to use the same needle that you were using anyways. That's the kind of stuff that you can see in your job, in your work later. So follow your intuition. You know, for the most part, your brain will tell you what you need to do. Obviously, you'll know more as you gain more experience, but when you're in workflow, and this is something that applies not just to tattooing but just in life in general, like when you're in workflow, like your mind will tell you what you need to do. You just have to listen and you have to do it. So a lot of the times, you know, I'm just tattooing and all of a sudden I hear this little voice like switch to a different needle, and it'll tell me the needle that I need. And you can choose to either listen and do it, or you can ignore it. You will notice that when you don't hear that voice, you will make a mistake. For example, right now my head is telling me to pick up a different needle because this needle that I'm using doesn't fit the area, and I can be lazy and I can choose to try to do it with that needle, or I can listen to my voice and I can pick the right needle. And the more that you learn to listen to that voice, the better your work is going to come out. I guarantee you that. If you just follow that simple concept, your tattoos are going to skyrocket. That's if you're already tattooing. If you're learning, learn from the get-go. Like, listen to yourself, listen to your inner voice. That's your intuition. You know, tattooing is a creative, intuitive process. So we all have that intuition. Listen to it. And obviously, the more that you learn, and the more that you know, the more that voice is going to speak to you. So right now I'm doing the shadows to the fingers, as you guys can see here. I want to make sure that I clean those edges really well. I think at this point I'm using a 3-round shader. I'm being super detailed with my movement, because these are very small areas that I want to make sure that I get them right, okay? These are the little things that matter, guys. These are the little things that make a difference between a decent tattoo or a good tattoo and an outstanding tattoo. This is what determines quality. It's those little details. Like I just heard in a book that I'm reading now, it's a business book, but it has a great principle, which is the 5% principle. And what this principle says is that most people will do 95% of things right, but they'll leave 5% of things that are not done well. And people who excel in life, whether in business or in art or whatever you want to excel at, they focus on that 5%. They're constantly looking how to improve upon that 5%. And this is the little 5% in tattooing. You know, picking the right needle, mixing the right color, like all these little things that you may not think they're too important. These are the things that make a difference. This is what's going to determine how good of an artist, how much quality you can put out. Okay, so now I'm listening and I'm hearing switch needles, so I'm ready to switch to a bigger needle. Another thing that I just thought about, because my client was moving to make sure that I was comfortable. Ideally, everybody has to be comfortable. When it comes down to it, the person that has to be the most comfortable is you as a tattoo artist, because you can't make precise movements if you're extremely uncomfortable, if you're bent in an awkward way. You always got to make sure that you have a good posture, that you are in a good position, that you're sitting in the right way, and that you're seeing what you're doing in the right way, so that you can give your client the best quality you can possibly give. And you will see that when you show that to your client, when you show that you care, and when you show that you're giving them the best that you can give, the best that you can put out, you will have the most compliant clients ever. They'll move, they'll twist, they'll turn, whichever way they need to, because they know that you're doing your job, and they know that you're giving them everything you got. And that is so important, guys. That brings me to another point, which is to always give everything you got in every single tattoo that you do. Imagine that whichever tattoo you're doing, and this is something that I always had in mind when I was learning, I heard this once and I never forgot, is imagine that the tattoo that you're doing now will be the last tattoo that people are going to remember you by. You know, that you're going to die the minute after you're done, and that's going to be your last piece of work. And when you have that kind of mindset, you're going to perform, you know, and you want to be consistent with your performance. You don't want to do a good tattoo now and then a bad tattoo later because you feel differently, or you know, whatever, that morning you woke up with a headache or whatever it may be. Like, always make sure you're feeling well. If you're not well, don't tattoo. Or if you're not happy, at least, I don't know, pretend to be happy or work it out in your mind. But you cannot give a different quality of tattoo depending on the day of the week, depending on how you feel, depending on what you ate. You have to make sure that you're always putting out your best work. And that's how you're going to make sure that you build a loyal clientele, people that love you, that care for you, that want to make sure that you do well because you look out for them. You're giving them your best every single time. This is super important if you want to build a tattoo career. Every single tattoo that you put out, it goes out into the street. That's your business card. So you got to make sure that you do right by every single person. It doesn't matter who it is. You got to give them everything. You got to give them the clean lines. You got to give them the solid shading. You got to give them the nice crispy highlights. Like everything that a tattoo requires to be good, you have to do it every single time. If you're tired that day, maybe don't finish the tattoo. Leave it for a second session. But always make sure that you're doing everything on every single tattoo. Okay, so now I'm going to speed up the video a little bit so I can finish the rest of this shirt and I can show you guys the end result, okay? Alright guys, so I am almost done with Orco. I'm just filling in his eyes right now with yellow using a round shader. I believe this is a 5 round shader, and again I'm doing it in the same exact method that we spoke about. I'm going to line the corners because I want those corners to be nice and crispy, and then I'm going to shade the inside just like so. And we're gonna do the other eye using the same exact technique. Okay, and here you guys can see the end result. One quick note that I wanted to tell you guys about: as I was shading the shirt and I was doing the light tone, I realized that there wasn't enough contrast between my light tone and my darkest tone. So I did have to make an adjustment. I went back and I mixed a darker color for the shadow, significantly darker than you guys are seeing here, because when you adjust the color, it's not going to adjust to the color that you have in the needle. It's going to mix with what's already there, and it's going to create some sort of middle tone. So this is something that I don't recommend for you guys to do if you're just starting out, because you can really hurt the skin. But what I ended up doing was I lowered my voltage. So right now I'm working at about 8.7 volts. I lowered my voltage to about 5.5 or 6. So my machine was going way down, and I just lightly grazed over the shadows with my darker tone, and it adjusted it, and it gave me this tone, which is perfect for what I needed, because it gave me enough contrast where you guys can see you know, the difference between the light side of the shirt and the dark side of the shirt. Alright, so that's pretty much it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one, guys.